It was a quiet Thursday evening when a loud knock shook our front door. Not a gentle tap, but a pounding like someone was trying to break in. My pregnant wife, Emma, opened the door, thinking it might be a neighbor in need. Instead, a burly man in a black vest labeled Homeowners Alliance Patrol shoved his boot into the doorway and pulled out a knife. He stared at her and growled, "You folks need to learn to follow the rules." I stood just 20 feet away, frozen for a heartbeat. Then, without a word, I slipped my hand into my pocket and pressed the panic button on my keychain. Somewhere in the garage, a silent alarm went off and our porch camera started recording. I didn't shout or panic. I just said, "You just made a mistake bigger than you know." Then I turned and walked toward the gun safe. That was the moment the thug realized he'd picked the wrong house. 2 hours earlier, everything had been normal. Emma and I were planning the nursery, debating paint colors and whether a stuffed elephant was really necessary. I'd gone to the garage to dig up an old paint sample when I heard the knock. At first, I ignored it. We often got packages or flyers, and the dogs usually barked before I even noticed the doorbell. But when a second, louder bang echoed through the house, I started walking back inside. Emma had already opened the door before I could call out. I heard her say, "Hi, can I help you?" in her calm voice. Then a man's gruff voice cut her off, talking over her. By the time I reached the entryway, I saw him leaning in, hand on the doorframe, clearly angry. He wore cargo pants, boots, and a black vest with a cheap patch that said Homeowners Alliance Patrol. It was fake, no such group existed. Everyone knew that. But this guy was waving a clipboard like he had real power. When Emma tried to close the door, he jammed his boot in the gap and flipped open a small knife with a sharp click. I'll never forget the look on Emma's face. It wasn't fear, it was something harder, colder. She'd already dealt with enough harassment from the Homeowners Association, but this was different. As I stepped into view, our eyes met. No words, no chaos, just a silent understanding between two people who'd faced tough times before. I pressed the panic button on my belt loop. It wasn't just for the car, it connected to our home security system, cameras, alerts, and automatic evidence uploads. We'd installed it after the association wrongly fined us for a shed they claimed wasn't there, only to back off when they lost the paperwork. That night, I was glad I'd planned ahead. The man glanced at me, knife still in hand, and hesitated. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked slowly down the hall to the basement door. I could feel his confusion as I unlocked it and went downstairs. By the time I came back, he was gone. I didn't need to chase him. The system had already captured his face, his license plate, and sent the footage to our secure cloud. Within minutes, the police were on their way. A few weeks earlier, the signs had been there. The Homeowners Association had elected a new president, Laura Bennett, who acted like she was running a military base. She pushed new rules without votes, like banning sidewalk chalk or keeping garage doors open for more than 5 minutes. The neighborhood was furious, but Laura had a plan: scare the quiet ones and surround herself with loyal followers. That's when her volunteer patrol started. They wore cheap vests and carried old radios, strutting around like a private army. I brought it up at the last meeting, asking where their authority came from. Laura smirked and said, "Some people just don't like responsibility. No one voted for patrols. No one approved weapons." When I asked to see the meeting records, they were archived. I tried to warn the neighbors, even made flyers about the limits of association power and the risks of untrained security. Most agreed, and a few urged me to run for president next term. But the problem was urgent. Laura wasn't waiting, and neither were her thugs. Back in the moment, after the man fled, I checked on Emma. She was shaken but steady. We'd been through worse. She once had to testify against a coworker who stalked her for months. She didn't scare easily, but this was different. It happened at our home, in our safe neighborhood, backed by a community board pretending to enforce rules. When the Willow County Sheriff's deputies arrived, they took one look at the footage and knew it was serious. The man was identified within hours, thanks to facial recognition and license plates. He wasn't even a resident. He lived 2 towns over in Maple Grove and was hired, unofficially, by Laura herself. He was a friend's cousin who volunteered for clean communities. A deputy looked at me and said, "Sir, if you didn't have cameras and stayed calm, this could have gone very differently." He was right. That night, neither Emma nor I slept. Instead, I gathered every piece of evidence, association emails, footage, my earlier complaints, into a digital folder. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. By morning, justice was already heading for Laura's door. This wasn't just a man with a knife. It was an attack enabled by an out-of-control association, and I was ready to fight back. The basement safe wasn't some store-bought box. It was custom-built into the foundation, hidden behind a false wall I'd installed myself. Years ago, I worked as a federal security contractor, the kind of job that teaches you to stay ahead of threats. While others stocked up on batteries and canned food, I invested in tactical gear, biometric locks, and a security system with backup power. I never thought I'd need it against my homeowners association, but that night changed everything. Emma sat on the couch, holding a glass of water, her hands steady but her eyes jumping at every sound. The adrenaline was gone, but the reality lingered. Someone had sent a man with a knife to our home. When I opened the safe, I took only what I needed, a Glock 19, holstered under my jacket, with a spare magazine checked. I wasn't planning a fight, but I wasn't letting this fake patrol come back unprepared. They'd underestimated us once. I wouldn't let it happen again. I reviewed the porch footage on my tablet, frame by frame, capturing the man's face, his aggressive stance, the knife. His boot in the doorframe made it worse. That was unlawful entry. I sent the evidence to a secure cloud and backed it up on 3 devices. 15 minutes later, police lights flashed in our living room. The deputies swept the perimeter, checked windows, and made sure no other patrol members were nearby. I greeted them with my weapon already back in the safe. They appreciated that. Inside, I gave a full account, handed over the footage, and Emma provided her statement. She was calm, measured, but something had shifted in her. She didn't cry or raise her voice. She answered like she was in court. Her calm made the room feel colder. When a deputy asked if she wanted to press charges, she said, "Absolutely," without hesitation. By midnight, they'd identified the suspect, Michael Tanner, a 34-year-old from Maple Grove with a string of minor offenses, including trespassing and impersonating security. Nothing violent, but his pattern was clear. The biggest shock? He had no ties to our neighborhood. His connection was Laura Bennett, who called him her neighborhood safety consultant, in emails we weren't supposed to see. A deputy hinted they might be more than friends, given the association checks he'd cashed. The next morning, Laura marched up our driveway like she was delivering a gift basket, dressed in a pastel suit and oversized sunglasses. She didn't knock, just rang the bell twice and stood there, arms crossed. I opened the door halfway, making sure the camera was recording, and said nothing. She launched into a speech, no apology, claiming the man was just reminding us of rules and might have come off a bit strong. A bit strong? He pulled a knife on my pregnant wife. I didn't respond. I just held up my phone, tapped the screen, and played the video of the knife flicking open. Her smile vanished. She stepped back, glanced at the camera, and said, "There are 2 sides to every story." I told her she'd better prepare hers for the Willow County Sheriff, since they already had the footage. She walked off, mumbling about defamation and community safety. I almost laughed. She was used to winning, but she didn't know how far this had gone. Later, I drove to the sheriff's office to give a formal statement and deliver the evidence package. On my way out, I ran into Deputy Carter, who'd responded the night before. He pulled me aside and said, "Off the record, that woman's about to have a bad week." They'd had other complaints about association enforcers, but no one had solid evidence until now. My footage had opened the floodgates. One neighbor said they were followed by a black SUV after opposing Laura at a meeting. Another reported a late-night knock like ours, but didn't answer. By the time I got home, word was spreading. A neighbor, Tom, stopped me while I was checking the mail. He asked if it was true someone pulled a knife on Emma. I confirmed it, and he looked stunned. He said Laura had offered him $50 2 weeks earlier to wear a vest and patrol on weekends. He thought it was a joke, but now regretted not reporting it. That night, I compiled everything into a report I called the Homeowners Alliance Incident File. It had the porch footage, timestamps, Michael's record, screenshots of Laura's involvement, and our statements. I didn't send it to the association board. I emailed it to every homeowner in Cedar Hills with the subject, "This is what happens when power goes unchecked." The response was instant. Over a dozen neighbors emailed back, sharing stories of fines, stalking, or harassment under Laura's rules. Many hadn't spoken up, fearing retaliation. Now, with evidence, they were ready. This wasn't just about our porch. It was about the system Laura had built, a fake power structure hiding behind real association rules. She'd turned Cedar Hills into her personal empire, complete with enforcers and warped justice. But the curtain was up, and this wasn't over. The association meeting that night was at the Cedar Hills Community Center at 7 p.m., like always, with bad coffee and creaky fans. But this one was different. Word of my email had spread like fire. People who never attended meetings showed up, arms crossed, eyes narrow. Normally, 10 people came. This time, nearly 50 packed the room. At the front, behind a folding table with neat agendas, sat Laura Bennett, still in her pastel cardigan, acting untouchable. I walked in with a small projector and laptop bag. A few heads turned. Laura ignored me, shuffling papers she wasn't reading. The room buzzed with whispers, some about the knife, some about the guy who'd finally challenged her. When Laura tapped her clipboard and started, her voice was sweet but shaky. She thanked everyone, noted the unexpected turnout, and droned on about landscaping, pool hours, and a summer picnic, ignoring why we were all there. When she asked for new business, I stood, walked to the front, and plugged in my laptop without permission. Laura said, "Sir, please follow procedure," but stopped when the screen lit up with a paused video of Michael on my porch, knife in hand. I pressed play. Gasps filled the room. The footage was clear. Michael's threats, Emma's calm voice, the knife, the panic button, my words, "You just made a mistake bigger than you know," now viral in the neighborhood's group chat. I stopped the video and let the silence settle. Laura stood, flustered, and said, "This isn't association business." A man in the back shouted, "You sent a thug to threaten a pregnant woman, and that's not our business?" Another yelled, "You let strangers carry knives." The room erupted. Laura banged a plastic gavel, but no one cared. A quiet retiree, Ellen, stood and said, "She told me my wind chimes were dangerous in a storm." People laughed, but it was an angry laugh. Others shared stories. Fines for trash bins out too long, warnings for too many flowers. Laura had weaponized small rules, and the neighborhood saw they'd all been targets. Then came a surprise. A man in a navy blazer stood up. I didn't know him, but others did. He was James Carter, former association vice president before Laura took over. He'd moved to Oakwood 6 months ago but came back after hearing about the incident. He had proof, printed emails, meeting minutes, and messages between Laura and the board. In one, she forged James's name to gain emergency powers after he left. Another showed her suggesting volunteer security to enforce rules faster. The bombshell, an email naming Michael and saying he was just aggressive enough to keep people in line. The room exploded. People shouted, cursed, and some called lawyers from the parking lot. Laura denied it, claiming the emails were fake, but the timestamps were airtight. James had saved everything, expecting trouble. As the chaos peaked, Laura slammed her folder and screamed, "You're all being fooled. He's got a gun safe." That backfired. An elderly woman snapped, "Thank God he does. You sent a criminal with a knife." Laura looked around, alone, with no allies, just angry neighbors and evidence glowing on the screen. Someone called for an emergency vote, allowed by the bylaws if most homeowners agreed. Laura claimed it was illegal without a board quorum, but James pointed out she dissolved the board herself in a power grab, leaving her alone. With no board, homeowners had full authority. The vote took 5 minutes. 50 of 53 voted to remove her, 2 abstained, 1 voted no. Laura. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, muttering about lawsuits. Someone yelled, "Get a criminal lawyer." Laughter broke out, this time with relief. After the meeting, nearly everyone approached me. Some shook my hand, others apologized for staying quiet, a few offered me a board seat. I said no but promised to help rebuild. Ed, an older man in a Vietnam vet hat, said, "I've seen a lot, but I never thought I'd thank a guy with a Glock and a camera in the suburbs." That night, Emma and I sat on the porch. The air felt lighter, like a weight had lifted from Cedar Hills. It wasn't over, legal battles loomed, but for the first time since the knife, we felt peace. Michael was in custody, Laura was out, and the community had found its voice. The fallout came fast. By morning, Laura's name was erased from every association document, mailbox, and newsletter. The new interim board, formed by residents who spoke up, filed a police report on Michael's actions and Laura's role. The Willow County Sheriff escalated it, not just assault, but impersonation, unlawful entry, conspiracy, and possible misuse of funds. The district attorney called me 2 days later for a full statement, hinting at charges against Laura. What started on our porch was now a legal storm, and Laura was at its center. She tried to play it off, posting in the neighborhood chat that she was a victim of a smear campaign, claiming my video was edited and Michael acted in self-defense. The replies were brutal. "A knife on a pregnant woman is self-defense? You sent someone to photograph my kids' toys, that's stalking." She deleted the post, but screenshots spread. Michael's arraignment was a week later. The courtroom was packed. I sat with Emma, her hand on her stomach, shielding our baby. Laura was there, arms crossed, trying to look confident. The prosecutor listed charges: aggravated assault, trespassing, impersonating an official, and felony intimidation. Michael's lawyer called it a misunderstanding, but when the judge asked if he had any security training, Michael said, "Laura told me it was okay." The judge looked at Laura and asked if she was under investigation. The prosecutor said yes. Laura turned red, her world cracking. Michael was held without bail for a mental evaluation. Laura fled before reporters could swarm her. The next day, she got a subpoena for a deposition about her patrol program. She lawyered up, but the deposition was a disaster. She denied authorizing weapons, but an email surfaced where she wrote, "Make sure Michael carries something intimidating." Her lawyer sank. She claimed payments to Michael were for maintenance, but there were no records, just Venmo payments labeled Enforcer and Fixer. By the third hour, she was shaking, pleading the fifth on key questions. Then the insurance company stepped in. They investigated after hearing of criminal charges and ruled Laura's actions weren't covered, leaving the association, and Laura, since she dissolved the board, liable. Homeowners were furious. Lawsuits popped up, demanding refunds for illegal fines. One neighbor sued for emotional distress after an enforcer followed her daughter home. Laura tried a TV interview, claiming she was protecting Cedar Hills. But when asked about texting Michael to make them scared, she stammered, called it a joke, then muttered, "They're all idiots," on a hot mic. The clip went viral, with news calling her the HOA tyrant. Even state officials began reviewing association oversight laws. Our civil suit moved fast. The evidence, footage, emails, misused funds, neighbor stories, was airtight. Our lawyer said we could settle, but Emma wanted it in court, on record, as a lesson. We gathered statements, handwritten letters, quiet talks at our door. People apologized for staying silent or shared fears of retaliation. One neighbor had video of an enforcer yelling at his kids for biking. It all joined the case. Life at home slowly normalized. Emma focused on the nursery, finding joy in small things. I upgraded our security, not out of fear, but because we'd learned how fragile safety can be. The threat was now in court, and it was losing. We didn't want revenge, just accountability. The final hearing was packed with neighbors and local reporters who'd followed the viral clips. The judge, a stern older man, saw this as more than an association dispute. It was about safety and abuse of power. Laura sat at the defense table, her lawyer's excuses useless. Her smug look was gone. Our attorneys started with neighbor testimonies, a mom whose son stopped biking, an elderly couple fined for a flag, a man followed by an SUV. Then the video played. Michael's knife, Emma's voice, my line about the safe, the police. The silence was heavy. Laura's defense claimed Michael acted alone, but the emails proved otherwise. She tried to play victim, but when the judge asked why she denied guilt despite evidence, she had no answer. She mumbled about betrayed residents. The judge called her leadership tyranny disguised as service. The ruling came that afternoon. Laura was liable for $275,000 in damages, mostly to Emma for the knife incident's trauma. The association's separate suit made her repay misused funds. Her accounts were frozen, her car repossessed in front of neighbors. Someone streamed it, titled Laura's Car Towed. Justice for Cedar Hills. She moved out 2 weeks later, her house sold to cover legal fees. She left without a word, her pastel shutters gone. A new couple moved in, bringing cookies to everyone. Cedar Hills changed. Rules were rewritten with input, fines reversed, and the new board, a retired judge, a teacher, and a veteran, brought fairness. People waved more, kids played outside, and the association mailbox read for the people. At our baby shower, neighbors threw a surprise party. The best gift? A onesie saying "Born Free" from Laura's HOA. Everyone laughed. It was more than a joke. It was a victory. Weeks later, the district attorney sent a letter. Laura took a plea deal, avoiding jail but banned from any leadership role in any association or community group in Willow County. She'd built her life on control, now she couldn't control a stop sign. I framed the letter above the gun safe, not to brag, but as a reminder. Preparation, calm, and truth beat threats. That summer, I stood on our porch with our newborn son, Liam, watching the sunset over a quiet Cedar Hills. No SUVs lurked, no strangers patrolled, no pastel tyrants ruled. The chaos was gone, but the lesson stayed. Protect what matters, stand firm, and when a thug pulls a knife, show the world why you built the safe. Cedar Hills wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a community that fought back and won together.